Ms. Ana Gomes, socialist member of the European Parliament and one of Parliament experts in foreign affairs. Thank you so much for joining our program. Ms. Gomes, prospects for 2016, fight against terrorism versus freedom of movement, border control versus migration, refugees and their human rights. How would 2016 look like for the EU?
I believe it will be a decisive year for us to save the Union and what it means in terms of values and principles. And that means that we cannot fight terrorism by, for instance, violating human rights, namely of the refugees and migrants, which we are under the legal and moral obligation to help. We should not allow our governments to actually continue to confuse the fight against terrorism and the situation of the afflux of migrants and refugees. They are fleeing terror, many sorts of terror, including the same kind of terrorists we are now facing in Europe. Our governments have to understand that, yes, we need better border controls, but we cannot secure every inch of our maritime or land borders. It's by opening safe and legal ways for migrants and refugees to put their applications that we can indeed control who is coming, that we should help to integrate them properly. We should not help create more Molenbeeks, where the resentment builds a situation where indeed attacks are being planned against us. Our governments are in denial. They talk about foreign fighters, and actually the majority of the terrorists, all the terrorists who have attacked in Paris in January and now, have been actually Europeans. And so there is a malaise with Europeans, and we have to see that some of our policies have actually aggravated the feeling of exclusion, the feeling of alienation, the feeling of resentment that makes the Molenbeeks be the breeding ground for terrorists. The terrorists are not among the refugees and migrants. They are at home. And in order to actually help integrate the refugees and migrants, we must have other kinds of policies and not building walls, because this is not going to prevent the people from coming. I mean, I come from Portugal. When we had no Schengen, when we had so-called secured borders, 1 million of the citizens of my country passed those borders illegally to go and work in France and in Germany and in
other European countries.
And if people are fleeing for their lives, they will. If they don't come through the door, they will come through the window. And actually opening safe and legal borders is the only way to deny the profit to the networks of the traffickers who are actually exploiting this need of these human beings that are seeking to save their lives.
Another topic in 2016, the UK's referendum regarding their future EU membership. Are we going to have a Brexit or not? Your view?
I'm afraid we will see a result of the referendum in favor of a Brexit, because Mr. Cameron cannot control the genius that he put out of the bottle. And he will, whatever agreement, he will get some kind of agreement that we will try to portray to the British people as a big result, but it won't be anything, peanuts. And it won't be enough, because he has indeed put out of the bottle this genius that the right wing has been exploring in Britain, anti the European Union. So I fear that will be indeed the outcome, whether Mr. Cameron wants it or not.
What about the EU? Is that a huge loss?
Yes, I'm sure it will be a huge loss for the EU, but we will survive it. We may deepen the European integration, which is something that Britain has been actively preventing. And so whenever Britain will want to rejoin us...
Possible enlargement also?
I think more important than enlargement at this moment is indeed deepening the EU integration. That's exactly the reasons why we are not coping with the threats we are coping. For instance, terrorism. We need, for instance, much more sharing of information, intelligence to actually fight terrorism. And this is not being done on the explanation that there is national sovereignty to respect it. National sovereignty doesn't save the European citizens from the scourge of terror attacks. We need Europe. We need to work Europe. This is a threat, like many others we are facing, that knows no borders. So we need Europe more than ever. And we don't need members who are actually preventing European Union to deepen the integration.
We need more Europe also to have better relationship with Russia, for instance, in 2016?
Yes, and better relationship is not a Europe that backs off from what it thinks it's right. And namely when it comes to criticizing and disagreeing with Russia, namely because of its provocative and aggressive actions, for instance, in neighbors such as Ukraine and in others, in disturbing, for instance, many other countries in our common neighborhood, and interfering and transforming some of these countries like Moldova in platforms for organized crime against all the Russian people, but as well our peoples, and not to mention the peoples of those countries. So yes, I mean, I believe that we need to work with Russia. We can work with Russia. I hope we will work with Russia in a solution for Syria, for Libya.
But keeping the sanctions.
But on the other hand, of course, we cannot condone the aggressive actions of Russia. Russia needs to understand that it cannot play with the European Union. And it's our disunity that plays into the hands of those who oppress the Russian people, who do not allow the Russian people to actually live in a democratic atmosphere, as I'm sure the Russian people want.
My last question to you, Mrs. Gomes. Eastern Partnership, still alive in 2016? Your view?
I hope so. It will be alive. It doesn't depend only on us. It depends on the peoples of those countries, namely on their capacity to resist the interference by the likes of the regime of Putin in manipulating the political atmospheres in their own country in an anti-European approach. But I hope so, that this partnership is something important for us as much as for the peoples.
Is it important for the EU?
I think it is important, and it ought to have more contents, less rhetoric and more deeds, more concrete actions, people-to-people actions that will indeed help as well reinforce the strength of the people of these countries in the Eastern Partnership to actually resist interference from powers like Russia.
Ms. Gomes, thank you so much for this interview.